Woman finds her cleaning lady, crying at her husband's grave, and discovers something shocking. Rebecca Mitchell walked silently through Greenwood Memorial Park, holding a bouquet of white lilies that trembled in her gloved hands. It had been exactly 6 months since Richard had passed, and each visit to the grave still felt like a punch to the chest. But as she approached the family tomb, she felt her legs go weak. There, kneeling before her husband's grey marble headstone, was Grace, her cleaning lady of 3 years. The woman was sobbing in a way that broke the heart, holding a small white daisy with trembling hands. Rebecca stood frozen, hidden behind a cypress tree, watching a scene that made no sense at all. How did Grace know where Richard was buried? Why was she crying like that, as if she had lost someone very important? The 52-year-old businesswoman felt her stomach churn when she noticed the employee murmuring something softly, like a private prayer. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Richard. You'll never know how much you did for me and my family," whispered Grace, placing the flower on the headstone with a tenderness that left Rebecca cold. When the cleaning lady stood up and turned to leave, she came face to face with her employer's shocked gaze. The fright was so great that Grace dropped the worn fabric bag she was carrying, scattering some papers on the ground. "Mrs. Mitchell, I can explain," stammered the 45-year-old woman, trying to gather the papers with desperate hands. "Explain what, Grace?" Rebecca's voice came out colder than she intended. "How did you know where my husband was buried? Why are you here?" The cleaning lady tried to flee, but Rebecca grabbed her arm with a strength she didn't know she possessed. "Answer me," she demanded, her heart beating out of rhythm. "What is this story about thanking Richard? Thanking him for what?" Grace lowered her head, tears streaming down her tanned face. Her hands still trembled when she finally found the courage to speak. "Mrs. Mitchell, I knew your husband a long time ago, long before you." Rebecca's world seemed to collapse. During her 20 years of marriage to Richard, he had always been reserved about the past, but she never imagined he would hide previous relationships. "Relationship?" The word came out like a strangled whisper. "No, it's not what you're thinking." Grace shook her head quickly. "Mr. Richard and I grew up in the same neighborhood over in Brookside District when it was still the outskirts. We were neighbors." Rebecca felt her legs weaken. Richard had always said he came from a middle-class family from the South Side. He never mentioned any past in the outskirts. "That's impossible. My husband grew up in Brentwood in a traditional family." "Mrs. Mitchell," Grace wiped her nose with the back of her hand, "I lived on the street behind the house where your husband lived, with Mrs. Dorothy, his mother. It was a simple little house with 2 rooms. Richard was about 15 when we met." The businesswoman shook her head vigorously. Mrs. Dorothy, her mother-in-law, had always confirmed Richard's stories about a wealthy childhood. There were photographs of the big house, of the grandfather's imported car. "My husband showed me pictures of the house where he grew up. It was a mansion. He must have gotten those pictures from somewhere." Grace sighed deeply. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know it's hard to believe, but your husband grew up poor. Very poor. Mrs. Dorothy worked as a seamstress and could barely pay the rent." Rebecca released the employee's arm and took a few steps back, trying to process that information. If it were true, why would Richard lie about something so basic? "And why were you thanking him?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Grace hesitated, biting her lower lip. She looked at Richard's grave and then back at Rebecca. "When I was 15, my mother got very sick. She needed some expensive medicines that we couldn't afford. Mr. Richard, even though he was young and poor too, found a way to get the money. He worked side jobs as a construction worker, a loader, anything. For 3 months, he bought my mother's medicines. My mother got better, Mrs. Rebecca, and it was because of him. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." Rebecca felt the ground move beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about Richard was being questioned by a woman who cleaned her house 3 times a week. "If you were so close, why did he never tell me about you? Why did you never mention you knew him?" "Because he asked me not to say anything." Grace lowered her voice. When I started working here, he recognized me right away. He got very nervous, said he had built a new life and needed to keep the past in the past." "Lies!" Rebecca exploded. "My husband was not a liar. And how did you get this job? How did you know our address?" Grace's silence was more revealing than any words. The cleaning woman averted her eyes, confirming the suspicions beginning to form in Rebecca's mind. "You came after him on purpose, didn't you?" I needed work, Mrs. Rebecca, and when I found out he lived here—" "How did you find out?" The businesswoman's voice rose an octave. "How did you discover where my husband lived?" Grace shrugged, clearly uncomfortable. "My daughter Jessica works for a cleaning company that services office buildings. She saw his name on a plaque and told me the address." Rebecca felt a wave of nausea. The coincidence was too great to be chance. "How long have you known where Richard lived?" "About 4 years." "And you only decided to look for work here 3 years ago?" Rebecca narrowed her eyes. "What were you waiting for?" I was afraid. Afraid that he wouldn't want to see me, that he'd be angry." "Angry why, Grace? What else aren't you telling me?" The cleaning woman opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Her hands were shaking so much she had to interlace her fingers to hide it. "Mrs. Rebecca, it's nothing like what you're thinking. Your husband was always an honorable man." "Then tell me everything." Rebecca took a threatening step toward the maid. "If there's nothing to hide, why all the beating around the bush?" Because he helped me with other things too. For years. And I promised I would never tell anyone." Rebecca's heart raced. Other things? For years? The implications of that revelation made her head spin. "What kind of other things?" "Money," Grace whispered so softly Rebecca could barely hear. "He sent me money every month." The businesswoman felt her world completely collapse. Her husband had been secretly sending money to another woman during their marriage. The betrayal she had always feared was finally being revealed. "For how long?" "Since I started working here. Maybe before too, I don't know." Rebecca clenched her fists so hard, her nails dug into her palms. 20 years of marriage, 20 years believing she had a faithful husband, and she discovers he was supporting a mistress. "Get out of here," she said, her voice dangerously low. "Get out of here right now and never show your face at my house again. Mrs. Rebecca, please, let me explain. Get out!" The shout echoed through the cemetery, startling some birds into flight. "You're fired! I never want to see your face again." Grace quickly gathered the scattered papers and ran off, leaving Rebecca alone before her husband's grave. The businesswoman collapsed onto the nearest marble bench, feeling as if she had been punched in the stomach. She looked at the headstone where Richard Mitchell, dedicated father, beloved husband, man of integrity, was engraved and felt a terrible bitterness rise in her throat. A man of integrity? What kind of man of integrity lied about his own past and secretly supported another woman? The white lilies she had brought fell to the ground, forgotten. Rebecca couldn't even place the flowers on the grave. Instead, she stood up and walked back to the car, her mind buzzing with questions and her heart shattered. During the drive back home, she couldn't stop replaying every moment of the conversation. There was something in the way Grace spoke that didn't fit the idea of a mistress. The tone was more of gratitude than romantic intimacy. But if it wasn't that, what else could it be? She arrived at the mansion in Beacon Hill with her hands shaking so much she could barely put the key in the lock. The 6,000-square-foot house, with its designer furniture and expensive artwork, suddenly felt strange. How many other lies had Richard told? How many other things did she not know about the man she had shared 2 decades with? She went straight to Richard's office on the 2nd floor, a space she had avoided since his passing. She needed to find evidence of what Grace had revealed. If her husband was really sending money to the cleaning lady, there should be records somewhere. She sat in the leather armchair behind the mahogany desk and turned on the computer. Her daughter Emily had helped organize Richard's passwords and digital documents, so she had access to everything. She started with the bank statements from the last 3 years. Richard had always been meticulous with finances, categorizing every expense. She found the usual transfers: electricity bill, water, phone, groceries, credit card. But when she got to the Venmo transfers, she felt her stomach churn. On the 15th of every month, for exactly 3 years, there was a transfer of 1,000 reais to an account in the name of Jessica Davis Thompson, the same name Grace had mentioned as being her daughter. Rebecca printed the statements with trembling hands. 3 years, 36 transfers, 36,000 reais, a considerable amount for any lower-class family. But why was Richard sending money to the cleaning lady's daughter and not directly to Grace? She continued digging through the digital files and found a folder called Personal Projects that she had never seen before. When she opened it, she discovered dozens of subfolders with names she didn't recognize. Davis family, Mrs. Mary's house renovation, Peter's college, Mr. Joseph's surgery. Her heart raced when she opened the Davis family folder. There were photos of a simple house in a neighborhood she didn't recognize, receipts for building materials, and a series of bank transfers dating back to long before Grace started working for them. The transfers had started 5 years ago, always for the same amount, always to the same account of Jessica Davis Thompson. Richard had been sending money to that family even before hiring Grace as an employee. Rebecca felt a terrible dizziness. If the transfers started before Grace worked for them, it meant Richard was already in contact with the family. But why? And why hide it from her all these years? She opened the other folders and discovered a disturbing pattern. Transfers to different people, always in regular amounts, always accompanied by photos of simple houses, hospitals, schools. Richard was supporting not just Grace's family, but dozens of other people. In the Mr. Joseph's surgery folder, she found photographs of an elderly man in a hospital bed and receipts from a private clinic. The cost of the surgery was astronomical, 50,000 reais, paid in full by Richard. "My God," she murmured, running her hand through her blonde hair. "What were you doing, Richard?" The landline rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Mrs. Dorothy, her 73-year-old mother-in-law. "Rebecca, dear, how are you? It's been so long since we talked." "Hi, Mrs. Dorothy." Rebecca tried to control her voice. "I'm fine, thank you." "Were you at the Memorial Park today? I saw that the doorman wrote down your visit in the guest book." Rebecca hesitated. Mrs. Dorothy had always been a sharp woman, and maybe she knew something about Richard's past that could shed light on this mystery. "Mrs. Dorothy, can I ask you a question about Richard?" "Of course, dear. What do you want to know?" "Do you remember any maid or cleaning lady who worked for you when he was younger? A woman named Grace?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that Rebecca thought the call had dropped. "Mrs. Dorothy, are you there?" "Yes, I am." Her mother-in-law's voice sounded strange, cautious. "Why are you asking about that?" "Because I met this woman today at the Memorial Park, crying at Richard's grave. She said she had known him since he was a teenager." Another long silence. "Mrs. Dorothy, is it true that you lived in the Brookside district when Richard was a teenager?" "Rebecca," her mother-in-law's voice became firmer, "I think it's better if we talk in person. Can I come over tomorrow?" Mrs. Dorothy's evasive tone confirmed Rebecca's worst fears. If her mother-in-law didn't deny it immediately, it meant there was truth in Grace's words. "Can you come today? I need to know what's going on." "All right, I'll be there in an hour." Rebecca hung up the phone with her heart racing. If Mrs. Dorothy was coming in person, and so urgently, it meant there was much more to the story than she had imagined. She went back to examining the computer files, looking for more clues. In a hidden folder called Old Correspondence, she found dozens of scanned letters, all addressed to Richard, all signed by people with simple names: Grace, Mary, Joseph, Peter, Anthony. She opened one of the letters signed by Grace, dated 2 years ago. "Mr. Richard, I don't know how to thank you for what you're doing for my Jessica. Thanks to the money you send, she has been able to stay in medical school. You can't imagine how important it is for a mother to see her daughter fulfilling her dream of becoming a doctor. My Jessica always says she will repay all of this when she graduates. You are an angel in our family's life." Rebecca had to read the letter 3 times to fully absorb its meaning. Grace wasn't Richard's lover. She was, a charity beneficiary. A charity. But why would Richard choose that specific family to help? She heard the doorbell and ran to open it. Mrs. Dorothy was at the door, her face pale and her hands slightly trembling. "Rebecca, we need to talk," said her mother-in-law, entering the house without waiting for an invitation. The two sat down in the living room, and Mrs. Dorothy spent a few minutes in silence, clearly organizing her thoughts. "Richard made me promise I would never tell you this," she finally began, "but now that he's gone and you've discovered something, I think I have the right to break that promise." Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. "Tell me everything, Mrs. Dorothy. I need to know." "It's true that we lived in the Brookside district when Richard was a teenager, but not the fancy upscale Brookside district of today. It was the Brookside district of the 90s, when it was still a poor neighborhood." Her mother-in-law looked at her own hands, as if the words were physically painful. "I worked as a seamstress in a small garment factory. I earned very little, barely enough to pay the rent for a tiny two-room house. Richard grew up watching his mother work 16 hours a day and still struggled to make ends meet. But the pictures of the mansion, the car—" "Photoshopped," Mrs. Dorothy sighed. "When Richard started dating you, he was desperate, thinking you wouldn't accept him if you knew where he came from. He asked a friend to photograph his boss's house and made up that story about the wealthy family." Rebecca felt as if she had been slapped. 20 years of marriage based on a lie about something as basic as her husband's origins. "Why didn't he tell me the truth after we got married?" "Because he was afraid of losing you." Mrs. Dorothy wiped a tear that ran down her face. "And also because he became ashamed of the initial lie. The more time passed, the harder it became to confess." "And what about Grace? Do you know her?" Mrs. Dorothy nodded slowly. "Grace lived on the street behind our house, a sweet girl, daughter of a woman struggling to raise 4 children alone. When Grace's mother got sick, Richard was desperate to help." "Did he like her?" Rebecca asked, fearing the answer. "Like a sister," Mrs. Dorothy was quick to clarify. "Richard always had a very big heart to help those in need. Grace was like the little sister he never had." "But why keep helping after so many years?" "Because when Richard became wealthy, he never forgot where he came from. He once told me he felt guilty for having managed to escape poverty, while good people like Grace's family continued to struggle." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Rebecca ran her hands over her face, trying to process all those revelations. Her husband wasn't a manipulative liar, but rather a man who was ashamed of his own origins and tried to secretly give back to the community that saw him grow up. "Mrs. Dorothy, how many people did Richard help?" "Many, Rebecca. Dozens. He created a support network for the families in the neighborhood where we grew up. He paid for medical treatments, school fees, house renovations, anything that was needed." "And you knew about all this?" "I knew." Her mother-in-law lowered her head, ashamed. "And I agreed, but he made me promise not to tell you because he was afraid you would find out about his past." Rebecca stood up and began to pace back and forth across the room, trying to organize her thoughts. The bank transfers, the thank you letters, Grace's evasive behavior at the cemetery. Everything was starting to make sense. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to ask one more question, and please be honest with me." "What do you want to know?" "I fired Grace today. I thought Well, I thought other things. Did I do the right thing?" Mrs. Dorothy shook her head sadly. "Rebecca, Grace is one of the most honest people I know. If she was at the cemetery, it was only to say thank you. Richard completely changed that family's life." "How so?" "Her oldest daughter, Jessica, graduated from medical school last year thanks to Richard's support. She got a residency at a private hospital. The second daughter is finishing nursing school. The youngest son is starting engineering next year." Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. She had fired a woman of integrity out of pure jealousy and misunderstanding. And Grace never took advantage of his generosity. Never. She was always very reserved, never asked for anything beyond what Richard offered. She works hard, is a dedicated mother, a person of character. The doorbell rang again, interrupting the conversation. Rebecca went to answer it and found a young brunette woman about 25 years old, wearing business clothes and carrying a document folder. "Are you Mrs. Rebecca Mitchell?" the young woman asked politely. "That's me. How may I help you?" "My name is Jessica Davis Thompson. I'm the daughter of Grace, who worked for you." Rebecca felt her heart race. Grace's doctor daughter was there, at her doorstep. "My mother came home crying, said you had fired her," Jessica continued. "I came here to clear up some misunderstandings." Rebecca looked at the young woman carefully. She was well dressed, spoke with politeness and poise, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had studied and earned a respected profession. It was hard to believe that this young woman had grown up in poverty. "Please come in. Mrs. Dorothy, my mother-in-law, is here too." The three women sat in the living room, and Jessica opened the folder she was carrying. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know you found out about the bank transfers your husband was making to my account. I brought some documents to explain everything." Jessica pulled out a series of receipts, diplomas, and photographs from the folder. "This is my medical diploma," she showed the document with pride. "I graduated with the top grades in my class. I got a residency in cardiology at Mercy General Hospital." "It's very beautiful," Rebecca commented, genuinely impressed. "This diploma only exists because of your husband," Jessica said, her voice choked. "When I started college, my family couldn't even afford half the tuition. I worked during the day and studied at night, but even then I couldn't cover the costs." The young woman showed a stack of college tuition receipts. "Mr. Richard started paying for my college 5 years ago, without me even knowing who he was. The money arrived in my account every month, and my mother only said it was from a guardian angel." Rebecca flipped through the receipts, seeing the astronomical amounts Richard had paid monthly. A private medical college cost a fortune, and he had covered everything for 5 years. "But why didn't your mother say she knew my husband?" "Because he asked her not to," Jessica explained. "He said he wanted to help, but discreetly, without anyone knowing who he was or where he lived." "Then how did your mother get the job at our house?" Jessica hesitated, biting her lower lip the same way her mother did when she was nervous. I found out who our benefactor was by chance. I was doing an internship at a clinic in the same building as his office. I saw his name on the plaque and looked him up. When I found his home address, I told my mother. And she decided to apply for the cleaning job. "It wasn't quite like that," Jessica shook her head. "My mother was terrified when she found out. She said she didn't want to bother him, that he was already doing too much for us. But I insisted. I said she should at least thank him in person." "Was that when she looked for work here?" "Yes, but only to have a chance to meet the man who was changing our lives. She never imagined he would recognize her after so many years." Mrs. Dorothy, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "And when Richard saw your mother, he became very nervous. He was afraid Rebecca would find out about his past." "Exactly," Jessica confirmed. "He asked my mother never to mention that they knew each other. He said he was trying to protect his family from some complications." "What kind of complications?" Rebecca asked. Jessica exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Dorothy, as if they were hesitating to reveal something important. "Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs. Dorothy said carefully, "Richard was afraid you would find out not just about his past, but about the extent of his charity activities." "Why?" "Charity is admirable." "Because he spent a lot of money on it," Jessica explained. "A whole lot. Just with me it was over 200,000 reais in 5 years, and I'm just one of the people he helped." Rebecca felt a chill down her spine. 200,000 reais was a significant amount, even for someone with Richard's financial situation. How many people was he helping in total? "More than 20 families," Mrs. Dorothy replied. "Maybe 30, all from the neighborhood where we grew up." "My God," Rebecca murmured, doing mental calculations. If each family received help similar to Grace's, Richard was spending millions on secret charity. "That's why my mother was so nervous today at the Memorial Park," Jessica continued. "She knows you might find out everything and be angry about your husband's spending." Rebecca stood up and walked to the window, observing the well-kept garden of the mansion. How many mansions like that could Richard have bought with the money he spent helping other people? And why did that bother her? She should be proud to have been married to such a generous man. Jessica, may I ask a personal question? Of course. What's it like growing up receiving help from a stranger? Don't you feel dependent? The young doctor thought for a few moments before answering. At first, yes. When I found out someone was paying for my college, I felt very uncomfortable. I wanted to work more, get scholarships, anything to not depend on charity. And what changed? My mother told me something I never forgot. Jessica smiled sadly. She said that receiving help wasn't shameful. Shame would be wasting the opportunity. She said I should accept the help and use it to become someone who could help others in the future. And is that what you plan to do? I'm already doing it. Jessica showed a photograph of a simple medical office. I opened a free clinic in Brookside District, in the same neighborhood where my mother and your husband grew up. I treat people in need from Monday to Friday for free. Rebecca took the photograph and examined it carefully. It was a small but well-organized office with basic cardiology equipment. With what money did you set this up? With part of my residency salary and with an anonymous donation I received last month. Jessica smiled mysteriously. Anonymous donation? 50,000 rays deposited into my account without sender identification. I suspect it was your husband, perhaps one of the last things he arranged before passing. Rebecca felt a strange emotion rise in her chest. Even in his final moments, Richard was thinking about how to perpetuate his support network for the community. Mrs. Mitchell, Jessica continued, I know you fired my mother today, and I understand the reasons. But you need to know she never had ulterior motives. She truly loved working here, said it was a way to repay a little of what your family did for us. What do you mean, loved working here? My mother always said this house was special to her. Not because of the expensive furniture or the location, but because it was the home of the man who saved our family. She cleaned every room with care, as if she were taking care of a sacred place. Rebecca felt her eyes welling up. She had treated Grace like a criminal when, in fact, the woman considered it a privilege to work in her home. Jessica, where is your mother now? At home, crying. She's devastated. Not only because she lost her job, but because she thinks she disappointed your husband's memory. Disappointed how? By having told about his past. She thinks she broke a promise and betrayed the trust of someone who was very important to our family. Rebecca could no longer hold back the tears. Grace wasn't an intruder or a threat to the marriage. She was a woman of integrity, carrying an enormous weight on her shoulders. Gratitude for help that completely changed her life and that of her family. Mrs. Dorothy, she said, wiping her eyes, I think I made a terrible mistake today. We all make mistakes, dear. What's important is having the courage to correct them. Jessica, can you give me your mother's address? Of course, but why? Because I need to apologize to her, and maybe she can help me understand better who my husband really was. Jessica wrote the address on a piece of paper and handed it to Rebecca. Mrs. Mitchell, can I give you some advice? Of course. Don't go there today. My mother is very shaken up. Let her process what happened and go tomorrow. She'll be more receptive after a night's sleep. Rebecca nodded, putting the paper in her purse. One last question, Jessica. Did your mother ever talk about other secrets of my husband? Something I should know? The young doctor hesitated, exchanging another look with Mrs. Dorothy. They're not secrets, Mrs. Mitchell. They're stories. Stories about the kind of person your husband was when nobody was watching. What kind of stories? Stories that might help you feel proud of him, instead of hurt. After Jessica left, Rebecca stayed alone with Mrs. Dorothy in the living room. The silence between them was heavy, filled with revelations and regrets. Mrs. Dorothy, how could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, Rebecca. You were protected. Richard made sure to protect you from a world he thought you didn't need to know. But that was his world. It was where he came from. I should have known that part of him. Should have? Mrs. Dorothy tilted her head. Would you have married him if you knew he was poor? Rebecca stopped to think. At 32, when she met Richard, she was coming out of a relationship with a man from high society. She was looking for stability, security, someone who shared her standard of living. I don't know, she admitted honestly. Richard knew, Mrs. Dorothy said sadly. He knew you came from different worlds and that it could be an obstacle. That's why he made up a story that put you on the same social level. But after we got married, after I fell in love with him, his background wouldn't have mattered anymore. Maybe not. But by then, the lie was already established. And Richard was so afraid of losing you that he preferred to keep the secret. Rebecca sat down again, feeling the weight of 20 years of relationship being re-examined from a new perspective. Mrs. Dorothy, do you think I would have accepted his charity activities? Honestly, her mother-in-law hesitated. I think you would have questioned the values. You have a daughter to educate, a company to run, considerable expenses. Richard was donating a fortune every month. How much exactly? In recent years, about 15,000 reais per month, sometimes more, when there were medical emergencies or urgent renovations. Rebecca did the math quickly. 15,000 reais monthly meant 180,000 reais annually. In 5 years, almost 1 million reais. 1 million reais, she murmured. Or more, Mrs. Dorothy confirmed. Richard didn't hold back when it came to helping other people. And did this money come from his company? From his personal account. Richard was always very careful not to mix the company's finances with his personal activities. Rebecca thought about the business consulting company Richard had founded 15 years ago. It was successful, but not enough to generate profits that could sustain such large charitable spending without affecting the family's standard of living. Mrs. Dorothy, how did he manage to maintain our house, pay for Emily's private school, support our lifestyle, and still donate nearly 200,000 reais per year? Her mother-in-law looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the question. Mrs. Dorothy, Richard worked much more than you imagined, Rebecca. What do you mean? Besides the consulting company, he had other businesses, small investments, discreet partnerships, some activities that generated extra income. What kind of activities? Mainly buying and selling properties. He would buy old houses and apartments, renovate them, and sell them for a profit. He also invested in small local businesses. Rebecca remembered the weekends Richard spent visiting construction sites or checking on properties. She always thought they were related to his consulting business, but apparently they were side activities to fund his secret charity. He worked on weekends to get money to donate? He worked, and a lot. Richard slept little, woke up early, always with new projects in mind, all to maintain the family's standard of living and continue helping people in need. Rebecca felt a mix of admiration and guilt. While she enjoyed weekends resting or shopping, Richard was working double time to support a charity network she didn't even know existed. Why did he never tell me? I could have helped, participated in the projects, because he was afraid you would think it was excessive, and also because he wanted to protect you from the pressure and responsibility that came with it. What kind of pressure? Rebecca, imagine knowing dozens of families in vulnerable situations. Imagine being constantly approached by people who need help with surgeries, renovations, their children's education. It's an enormous emotional burden. Mrs. Dorothy stood up and walked to the window. Richard carried the fate of over 100 people on his shoulders. Every decision he made directly affected the lives of these families. It was a responsibility he didn't want to share with you. 100 people. At least, count children, wives, elderly parents. Every family he helped represented several people indirectly, depending on his generosity. Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. Her husband wasn't just a successful businessman. He was practically a private social worker, supporting an entire community with his own resources. Mrs. Dorothy, how did he choose who to help? Usually they were people from the neighborhood where we grew up, or referrals from people he was already helping. Richard had a very good information network. He knew when someone was going through hard times even before they asked for help. And did he visit these people? Yes, he did. Once or twice a month, Richard would go to the Brookside district to talk with the families, see how they were doing, check if they needed anything else. Rebecca remembered the Saturdays when Richard would leave to take care of some errands and come home in a slightly better mood, as if he had done something that made him satisfied. Was he happy when he returned from these visits? Very happy. Richard always said those meetings reminded him why he worked so hard. Seeing the family's progress, the children growing up, the young people graduating, that's what gave meaning to his life. The phone rang again, interrupting the conversation. Rebecca answered and heard the voice of her 17-year-old daughter, Emily. "Mom, I'm leaving school. Can I stop by the house before going to my prep course?" "Of course, honey. Your grandmother Dorothy is here too." "That's great. I haven't seen Grandma in a while. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Rebecca hung up and turned to Mrs. Dorothy. "I think Emily also deserves to know about the real father." "Are you going to tell her everything?" "I am. She has the right to know the honorable man her father was, not just the version he showed at home." When Emily arrived, she found her mother and grandmother sitting on the sofa with serious expressions. "Did something happen?" asked the teenager, dropping her school backpack on the floor. "Sit here, honey. I need to tell you some things about your father." Emily settled between the two women, clearly worried. "Bad things?" "No, honey. Good things. Very good things. Things that will make you feel even prouder of your father." Rebecca spent the next 40 minutes telling Emily about Richard's humble beginnings, the charity network he maintained, and the families he secretly helped. The teenager listened quietly, her eyes wide. "Dad did all that?" she asked when Rebecca finished. "He did, for years. Without telling anyone." "But why didn't he say anything? That's amazing." "Because he was afraid we'd think he was spending too much, or that we'd question his background." Emily shook her head vigorously. "Mom, I would never question something like that. On the contrary, I'd be super proud to have a dad like that." "And are you?" "I am." Emily smiled for the first time. "You know, this explains a lot about Daddy." "How so?" "Remember how he always insisted I shouldn't waste food? How he got mad when I complained about something we had at home? How he always emphasized the importance of studying and not depending on anyone?" Rebecca nodded. Richard had always been strict with Emily when it came to matters of character and responsibility. "Now I understand why," the teenager continued. "He knew what it was like to have nothing and wanted me to appreciate what I have." "Exactly," Mrs. Dorothy agreed. "Richard had a very difficult childhood and didn't want you to go through the same, but he also didn't want you to become a spoiled person. Grandma, Daddy told me some stories about when he was a child, but always vaguely. Now I understand why he didn't go into details." Emily picked up her phone and began tapping on the screen. "What are you doing?" Rebecca asked. "Looking for Grace on Facebook. I want to meet the family Daddy helped." "Sweetheart, I fired Grace today over a misunderstanding." "You fired her?" Emily seemed shocked. "Why?" Rebecca told her about the encounter at Greenwood Memorial Park and her mistaken conclusions. "Mom, you need to fix this," Emily said firmly. "If Daddy considered this woman important, we should too. That's what I plan to do tomorrow." "No, Mom. Today. Now. She must be devastated." Rebecca looked at her watch. It was almost 5 in the afternoon. "Emily, Jessica said I should let her mother process what happened." "Mom," the teenager interrupted, "if you had worked for 3 years in the home of someone you admired and were fired over a misunderstanding, would you want to spend the whole night suffering? Or would you prefer the misunderstanding to be cleared up as soon as possible?" Emily's logic was irrefutable. Rebecca picked up the paper with Grace's address. "Do you want to come with me?" "Of course," Mrs. Dorothy and Emily said, almost in unison. The 3 women got into Rebecca's car and headed to the Brookside district. During the drive, Mrs. Dorothy described how the neighborhood had changed over the years. That bakery on the corner, she pointed to a modern establishment, was where Richard bought bread every morning before school. It cost 10 cents per roll. And that square, she indicated a small green space, was where he played soccer with his friends. It didn't even have half the grass it has today. When they arrived at Grace's address, Rebecca was surprised. She expected to find a very simple house, but the residence was modest yet well kept, with a garden in front and fresh paint. "Grandma, this isn't the house where you and Daddy lived, is it?" "No, dear. The house where we lived was 2 streets over. Grace must have managed to move to a better home. They rang the doorbell and heard footsteps approaching. When the door opened, Grace appeared with eyes red from crying. Her shock at seeing the three of them standing at the door was evident. "Mrs. Mitchell? Mrs. Dorothy? What are you doing here?" "Grace," Rebecca said calmly, "I came to apologize. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to talk about my husband." Grace hesitated, but finally opened the door completely. "Please, come in." The inside of the house was simple, but very organized. It had basic furniture, but everything was impeccably clean and tidy. On the walls were family photos, Grace with 3 children at various ages, graduations, weddings. "Grace, this is my daughter Emily." Rebecca made the introductions. "Hi, Aunt Grace," Emily said spontaneously, making the woman smile for the first time that day. "Hello, dear. You look just like your father when he was your age." "You knew my father when he was a teenager?" "Yes, I did. A very polite boy, always willing to help others." The 4 of them sat in the small living room, and Grace served coffee in simple porcelain cups. "Grace," Rebecca began, "I came here because I discovered I made a terrible mistake today. I judged you without knowing the full story. Mrs. Mitchell, you don't need to apologize. I understand the situation I put you in. No, I do need to apologize, and I really need you to tell me about my husband, about the man I never fully knew." Grace looked at Mrs. Dorothy, who nodded encouragingly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. I want to know what Richard was like as a teenager, how he became the man who married me, how he managed to hide such a generous heart for so many years." Grace settled into the armchair and closed her eyes for a moment, as if organizing decades of memories. "Your Richard was a very special boy, Mrs. Mitchell. Even though he was poor, he was always different from the other boys in the neighborhood. Different how? More mature, more responsible. He saw his mother working so hard and wanted to help any way he could. By 15, he was already doing odd jobs to supplement the family's income." "What kind of odd jobs?" "He carried groceries at the market, helped neighbors with moving, did small repairs in houses, whatever came up." Emily leaned forward, interested. "And school? Did he like to study?" "He loved it," Grace smiled. "Your father was always very smart. He got the best grades in class, but he was never pedantic. He always helped classmates who were struggling." "How did he help me?" Mrs. Dorothy added. "When I came home tired from work, he'd already done his homework and still helped with household chores." "But when did he start showing interest in getting out of the situation you were living in?" Rebecca asked. Grace and Mrs. Dorothy exchanged a look. "That started after my mother got sick," Grace said sadly. "Seeing her suffering because she couldn't afford medicine really affected Richard." "How so?" "He became outraged by the injustice. He said it wasn't right for good people to go without while others had so much. That's when he started dreaming of becoming rich." "To help others?" "Initially, to help his own family and mine. But over time, the dream grew." Mrs. Dorothy continued. "Richard always said that when he got rich he wouldn't forget where he came from, and he kept that promise." "Grandma, how did Daddy manage to get out of poverty?" Emily asked. "By studying hard and working twice as hard. He got a scholarship to a private university but kept working to support himself." "And was it at university that he invented the story about the rich family?" Rebecca asked. "Yes," Mrs. Dorothy confirmed, ashamed. "He said it was the only way to be accepted by his middle-class classmates. But it worked," Grace added. "He graduated in business with top grades and soon got a job at a big company." "And when did he start his own company?" "A few years later. But even before that, as soon as he started earning a better salary, he already sought out our family to repay the help." Rebecca remembered the old bank transfers she had found on the computer. "Grace, how long exactly had Richard been helping your family?" "Officially, about 8 years, but actually he never stopped helping since he left the neighborhood." "What do you mean?" "Every now and then he would show up here with some excuse. He would bring a food basket, saying it was left over from somewhere, or he would offer some temporary work for my children. Always very careful not to seem like charity." "He visited you?" "Yes, he did. Once or twice a year, always discreetly. He would ask how we were doing, if we needed anything, how the children's studies were going. And you never suspected that he had become wealthy? We did suspect, Grace smiled. He would arrive here by car, well-dressed, clearly with a better life. But he never shared details, and we respected his privacy. Emily turned to her grandmother. Grandma, did you know about these visits? I did. Richard always told me when he was going to meet Grace's family. He would come home happy, saying the children were growing up well. Mrs. Dorothy, Grace said, do you remember when Richard paid for my father's surgery? I remember. Your father had a heart problem and needed urgent surgery. What surgery? Rebecca asked. My father had a heart attack about 6 years ago, Grace explained. He needed heart surgery that cost over 50,000 Rs. Our health insurance didn't cover it and we didn't have the money. And Richard paid for everything? He did. He said it was a loan, that we could pay it back when we could. But he never asked for a single cent. Emily looked at her mother with admiration. Mom, 50,000 Rs is a lot of money. Dad did that without even consulting you. Rebecca thought for a few moments. She vaguely remembered Richard mentioning an unexpected investment at that time, but she never knew what it was about. He mentioned something about an extra expense, but didn't give details. Mrs. Mitchell, Grace continued, your husband saved my father's life. And that wasn't all. When Jessica was finishing medical school, he paid for the equipment she needed for her internship. What equipment? Stethoscope, sphygmomanometer, proper clothes for the hospital. Things that are mandatory, but cost a fortune for someone starting out. And your other daughter? Did he help her too? Amanda is in her last year of nursing school, Grace said proudly. Also thanks to your husband. And my youngest son, Brian, is starting engineering next year. All 3 children in college? All of them. And all working in fields where they can help other people. Jessica is a doctor, Amanda is going to be a nurse, and Brian wants to be a civil engineer to build affordable housing. Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. Richard not only helped families financially, but also influenced the values of the young people he supported. Grace, do your children know who paid for their studies? They do, and they all promise to give back when they graduate and are settled. Give back how? By helping other families like ours. Your husband always said the goal wasn't to create dependency, but to form a network of people willing to help each other. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like, and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. A network of solidarity, Mrs. Dorothy added. That was Richard's dream. And did it work? Emily asked. Are other people he helped also helping other families now? It did work, Grace confirmed. There's a young man that Richard helped open an auto shop about 5 years ago. Today he employs 3 people from the neighborhood and offers discounted services to families in need. And there's a lady he helped set up a small bakery. She now donates bread every Sunday to families going through hard times. My goodness, Rebecca murmured. Richard created an entire social movement. He did, Grace nodded. And the most beautiful part is that he insisted people shouldn't know the initial idea came from him. He wanted everyone to feel like the protagonist of their own story. The living room door opened and a young woman of about 22 entered carrying nursing books. Mom, I'm back from college. She stopped upon seeing the visitors. Oh, sorry, I didn't know we had company. Amanda, come here, Grace called her daughter. This is Mrs. Mitchell, your Richard's wife, and Emily, his daughter. Amanda greeted the visitors politely, but Rebecca noticed the young woman seemed shy and a bit tense. Amanda is in her last semester of nursing school, Grace explained proudly. She's doing her internship at University Medical Center. How cool, Emily said. Do you like the field? I love it, Amanda replied, relaxing a bit. I always wanted to work caring for people, and thanks to your father, I managed to achieve this dream. Amanda, Rebecca said gently, do you remember my husband from his visits here? The young woman smiled nostalgically. Yes, I remember. Mr. Richard always asked about my studies, gave advice about the future. Once he told me something I never forgot. What was it? He said I had a special gift for caring for people, and that I should use that gift to make a difference in the world, that it wasn't enough to be a good professional. I had to be a professional who truly cared. And did you follow his advice? I follow it every day. During my internship, I always volunteer to stay with patients who don't have family nearby. I think it's the least I can do to honor the investment he made in me. Rebecca looked around the simple but cozy room and realized how many lives Richard had touched. They weren't just numbers on bank statements. They were real people with dreams, fears, and ambitions. Grace, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How did you feel working in our house, knowing everything Richard had done for your family? Grace thought for a few moments before answering. I felt privileged, Mrs. Mitchell. Every day I entered the home of the man who changed our lives and could repay him in some way, even if it was just by cleaning and organizing. You didn't feel embarrassed? At first, yes. When I realized your husband recognized me, I felt very ashamed. I thought he would think I was taking advantage of the situation. But he didn't. No. He pulled me aside on the first day and said he was happy to know I was doing well, that I had family and work. He said if I wanted to work there, I would be very welcome. And you never wanted to tell me who he really was. I wanted to very much, Grace admitted. Every time you spoke about him, I was dying to tell how special he was, how he changed so many people's lives. But I had promised to keep the secret. Grace, Emily interrupted, why do you think my father hid these things from our family? The cleaner looked at Mrs. Dorothy, as if asking for permission to speak. You can speak, the mother-in-law encouraged. I think he was afraid you wouldn't understand, Grace said carefully. Rich people have this habit of thinking poor people are lazy, that those who need help just aren't trying hard enough. But we don't think that way, Rebecca protested. You don't, but many people from your social class do, Grace continued. Your husband grew up poor and later lived among rich people. He knew the difference. What difference? Rich people who were never poor think poverty is due to lack of effort. A man who was once poor knows that poverty is a lack of opportunity. The simplicity and truth of that statement left Rebecca speechless for a few moments. Grace, did my husband say that to you? He did. Once he said he was afraid you might think he was throwing money away, helping people who weren't going to change their lives anyway. He thought I would think that? I don't know if he thought so, but he was afraid. Mr. Richard loved you very much, Mrs. Rebecca. He didn't want to risk creating conflict in the marriage over something that was very important to him. Mrs. Dorothy spoke up. Rebecca, you need to understand that Richard carried two identities, the successful businessman you knew at home, and the poor boy who never forgot his roots. And he thought these two identities couldn't coexist in our family. He thought it would be complicated to explain. How do you tell a teenage daughter that her father grew up going hungry? How do you explain to an upper-middle-class wife that her husband donates thousands of dollars every month to strangers? Emily shook her head vigorously. But Grandma, that wouldn't be a problem for me. It would be the opposite. I'd be super proud. Me too, Rebecca added. And I feel very sad to know that Richard thought we wouldn't understand. He was wrong, Amanda said timidly. Anyone would be proud to have a father like that. The front door opened, and a young man of about 20 entered carrying a college backpack. Hi, family, he said cheerfully, but stopped when he saw the visitors. Brian, come here, Grace called. This is Mrs. Rebecca and Emily, Mr. Richard's wife and daughter. The young man approached respectfully and greeted the visitors. Nice to meet you. I'm Brian, the youngest in the family. Hi, Brian, Emily said. I heard you're going to study engineering. Yes, I am, he smiled. Thanks to your father. If it weren't for him, I'd probably be working some dead-end job. Do you remember my father's visits? I remember every one. Your father always encouraged me to study, said I had the potential to be an engineer. When I doubted myself, he reminded me that intelligence has nothing to do with money. And that's true, Rebecca commented. My husband always said that. Mrs. Rebecca, Brian continued, your husband taught me something that changed my life. What? He said I shouldn't be ashamed of where I came from, but rather take responsibility for where I was going. That the past is meant to give us strength, not to limit us. He said the same thing to Jessica and me, Amanda added. Seems like my dad was a philosopher, Emily joked, but there was genuine admiration in her voice. He was, Brian confirmed. He always had some memorable phrase to give us strength when we were feeling down. Rebecca looked around the room and saw a close-knit, polite, hard-working family. 3 college students who grew up valuing education and work. A dedicated mother who raised her children with dignity despite financial difficulties. Grace, she said finally, I want to make a proposal to you. What proposal? I want you to come back to work at our house. Mrs. Rebecca, you don't have to... It's not out of pity or obligation, Rebecca interrupted. It's because you were part of Richard's life in a way I didn't know, and I want to learn about that part of him through you. Besides, Emily added, I want to hear more stories about my father, stories only you can tell. Grace looked at her children, who nodded encouragingly. All right, she said finally, but on one condition. What? I want you to allow me to tell you everything about your husband, all the stories, all the families he helped, all the projects he had for the future. He had projects for the future? So many. I wanted to set up an official foundation, create a scholarship program, build a free clinic. Rebecca felt her eyes welling up. Even in his final months of life, Richard was thinking about expanding his community support network. Grace, would you be willing to help me carry out these projects? Willing? The woman smiled for the first time that day. It would be an honor. Then it settled. Tomorrow you return to work, but now with a different mission. Besides taking care of the house, you'll teach me about the Richard I never knew. The 2 women embraced, and Rebecca felt as though she was regaining not just an employee, but a crucial piece of her husband's history. Mom, Emily said, can we come here more often? I want to get to know the family Dad considered important better. Of course you can, Grace replied warmly. You'll always be welcome here. As they were saying goodbye, Brian picked up an envelope from a shelf. Mrs. Mitchell, a letter arrived for your husband last week. The mailman delivered it here by mistake. The address was somewhat smudged. Rebecca took the envelope and saw it was addressed to Richard Mitchell, but the address was indeed stained, making it hard to identify whether it was for the office or home. It's from a medical clinic, she observed, seeing the logo on the envelope. You can open it, Mrs. Dorothy suggested. It might be important. Rebecca opened the envelope and read the letter silently. As she read, her expression grew increasingly surprised. What is it? Emily asked. It's a thank you letter from a clinic that serves underprivileged children. They're thanking Richard for a donation of 100,000 rials that allowed them to purchase new equipment. 100,000 rials, Grace repeated, impressed. They say here that the donation was made anonymously, but they managed to track it down and discovered it was him. Rebecca finished reading the letter and passed it to the others. They wanted to invite him to the inauguration of the new pediatric wing that was built with his donation. When was this donation made? Mrs. Dorothy asked. Rebecca checked the date on the letter. 2 months before he passed away. A respectful silence filled the room. Richard had made a significant donation, even knowing his health was fragile. Grace, Rebecca said, did you know about this clinic? Not specifically, but I know your husband always cared about the neighborhood children. He was always asking about the neighbors' younger children, whether they were healthy. I think we've found our first project to continue, Emily said. We can go to this inauguration and learn about the clinic's work. Good idea, Rebecca agreed, and maybe we can make a regular donation to maintain Richard's legacy. On the way back home, the 3 women talked about everything they had discovered. Mom, Emily said, how do you feel knowing all this? Confused, Rebecca admitted. On one hand, I feel proud to have been married to such a generous man. On the other, I feel sad that I didn't know this part of him. But now you do, Mrs. Dorothy reflected, and you can decide what to do with this knowledge. What do you mean? You could resent Richard for hiding these things, or you could feel privileged to discover you were married to an even more special person than you imagined. Rebecca thought about her mother-in-law's observation. It was true she felt somewhat betrayed by Richard's lack of trust, but the predominant feeling was admiration. "I think I feel privileged," she said finally, "and inspired." Inspired to do what? To continue his work, but transparently without secrets. They arrived home early in the evening. Rebecca went straight to Richard's office and turned on the computer again. This time she wasn't looking for evidence of betrayal, but rather information about the projects he had planned. In the Future Projects folder, she found a detailed document titled Richard Wilson Foundation. It was a complete plan to create an official organization that would continue the work he had been doing informally. The project included scholarship program for underprivileged youth, free medical clinic, vocational training center, microcredit program for small businesses, renovation and construction of affordable housing. Rebecca printed the document and took it to the living room where Emily was doing her homework. "Honey, look what I found." Emily read the document with growing attention. "Mum, this is incredible." Dad had everything planned down to the smallest details. He even calculated the costs and funding sources. He planned to use part of the company's income and also seek partnerships with other businesses. "Mum, are we in a position to carry out this project?" Rebecca thought about the question. Richard's company was well established and they had considerable financial reserves. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. With help, yes. We would need people experienced in social project management, specialized lawyers, accountants, and people who know the community that would be benefited. Exactly. People like Grace and her family. Emily closed her school books. "Mum, can I make a suggestion?" "Of course." "How about we call Jessica for a chat? She's a doctor, knows the reality of the community, and could help plan the free clinic." "Good idea. And maybe we can talk to Amanda about the nursing part, and with Brian about the housing issue. It would be like a family-wide consultation. It would be a way to involve the people who know best the work your father was already doing." Rebecca picked up the phone and called Grace. "Grace, sorry to bother you again today. Could you ask Jessica if she would have time to talk with us tomorrow? I found some of Richard's projects and would like her medical opinion." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. I'll ask and get back to you." A few minutes later, Grace called back. "Jessica can come tomorrow after her shift, around 3 in the afternoon. And she said she's very curious about the projects." "Perfect. And Grace, could you come a little earlier tomorrow? I want us to look together at all of Richard's files about the families he helped." "I can arrive at 8 in the morning." "Great. See you tomorrow." That night, Rebecca had trouble sleeping. Her mind wouldn't stop processing all the day's discoveries. In just a few hours, her perception of her husband had completely changed. Richard wasn't just the successful businessman and dedicated father she knew. He was also a man who carried the weight of dozens of families on his back, who worked double to sustain a network of solidarity, who dreamed of creating something bigger and more organized. Around 2 in the morning, she got up and went to his office. She sat in the armchair where he spent hours working and tried to imagine what went through his head during those moments of solitude. How many times must he have wondered if he was doing the right thing? How many times must he have felt overwhelmed by the responsibility? How many times must he have wanted to share this burden with his family, but didn't have the courage? In the desk drawer, she found a small notebook she had never seen before. It was a sort of diary where Richard wrote down personal thoughts about his social work. One of the entries, dated 6 months before his death, caught her attention. "Today, Jessica graduated from medical school. Seeing that girl I met when she was 15, from a family with no means, become a competent and dedicated doctor, makes me believe that all the effort is worth it. But I feel guilty for not being able to share this joy with Rebecca and Emily. They deserve to know what we're building here. Maybe it's time to tell them everything." Rebecca felt her eyes fill with tears. Richard had been planning to reveal everything, but life didn't give him enough time. She continued reading other notes. "Brian started engineering school today. Another dream coming true. How many children from Brookside District will benefit from the houses he'll build in the future? Investment in education always multiplies." Amanda is in her pediatric nursing internship. She has a natural gift for caring for sick children. She'll be an excellent nurse. Grace thanked me today for the 1,000th time, said she doesn't know how to repay me. I explained that she repays me every day by being an exemplary mother and raising children with integrity. Sometimes I think I learn more from this family than I teach. I need to tell Rebecca about all this. She has the right to know this part of me, and more importantly, she has the right to decide if she wants to continue this work when I'm no longer here. The last note was from just 2 weeks before his passing. I'm organizing all documents and projects to make everything clear if something happens to me. Rebecca is an intelligent and generous woman. I'm sure she'll understand and might even continue the work. My biggest regret is not trusting her from the beginning. Rebecca closed the notebook and cried silently. Richard had spent years carrying alone a burden they could have shared as a family. And at the end of his life he realized this, but didn't have time to make it right. The next morning she woke with renewed determination. She couldn't change the past, but she could honor her husband's memory by continuing his projects the way he would have wanted. As a family, transparently, with love. Grace arrived promptly at 8 o'clock and found Rebecca already awake, with coffee prepared and a stack of printed documents on the kitchen table. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. How did you sleep?" "Poorly," Rebecca admitted, "but for a good reason. I spent the night discovering new things about my husband." She showed the notebook to Grace, who flipped through it with emotion. "Grace, Richard was planning to tell our family everything. He regretted having hidden it for so long." "He really did. The last few times we spoke, he mentioned wanting to share this burden with you." "Why didn't he?" "I think he was waiting for the right moment." "And he was also worried about your reaction. But why did he think I would react poorly?" Grace hesitated before answering. "Mrs. Mitchell, may I be completely honest?" "Of course. Your husband grew up poor and later spent 20 years among wealthy people. He knew that not every wealthy person understands the importance of helping the poor." "Did he think I was like that?" "Not exactly. But he knew other wealthy families who criticized any kind of donation, saying it was a waste of money. And he was afraid I might think the same? He was afraid of creating conflict. Your husband loved you and Emily very much. He didn't want to risk the family's harmony." Rebecca understood. Richard had grown up in a world where survival was a daily struggle, then moved to a world where money was abundant, but not always used generously. He was navigating between two different universes and trying to find a balance. "Grace, help me understand something. How did Richard manage to organize time and money to help so many people without me noticing?" "He was very organized," Grace explained. "He kept detailed records of everything, who needed help, when, how much, and for what purpose." "And did he visit all these families?" "Not all, but most. Once or twice a month he would come to Brookside District and make his rounds of visits. And we thought he was working. He was working to improve the lives of people in need." Emily came downstairs for breakfast and found her mother and Grace chatting animatedly about Richard's projects. "Good morning. Have you started planning the foundation yet?" "We're organizing the data," Rebecca answered. "Grace told me your father regularly helped at least 20 families. 20 families means how many people?" "About 80 people in total," Grace calculated, counting parents, children, grandparents. 80 people depended on Daddy. Emily was impressed. "Not depended," Grace corrected. "They were helped by him. But they all worked, studied, made an effort. Your father didn't give money to anyone who didn't do their part." "How did he keep track of that?" "By visiting, talking, following each family's progress. If a child had low grades in school, he would go talk to them. If a young person was discouraged with work, he would give them psychological support." "Daddy was like a private social worker," Emily observed. "He was more than that," Grace said affectionately. "He was like a father to many people who didn't have one." The phone rang. It was Jessica, confirming she would come at 3 in the afternoon and asking if she could bring her siblings along. "Of course," Rebecca answered. "The more opinions, the better." "Mrs. Mitchell," Grace said after Rebecca hung up, "may I make a suggestion?" "Always." "How about we visit some of the families your husband helped, so you can see his work firsthand?" "Good idea. Can we do that this morning before the meeting with your children?" "We can. There's a family nearby it would be good for you to meet." The three women left the mansion and headed toward Brookside District. During the trip, Grace told them about the family they would visit. They're the Thompsons, Mrs. Mary, her husband Mr. John, and 2 teenage children. Mr. Richard has been helping them for about 4 years. What kind of help? Mrs. Mary was unemployed and wanted to start a small snack shop. Mr. Richard loaned the startup money and later helped with the first few months' rent. And did it work out? Yes, it did. Today the snack shop is doing well and they can support themselves. In fact, they've already paid back almost half of the loan. Do they know who Richard is? They know he helped them, but they don't know details about his life. Your husband was always very discreet. They arrived at a simple street in Brookside District and stopped in front of a small snack shop with the name Mary's Flavor on the facade. The establishment was small, but clean and well organized. A woman of about 45 was serving customers at the counter. When she saw Grace coming in, she smiled happily. "Grace, it's so good to see you. Hi, Mary. These are Mrs. Mitchell and Emily, Mr. Richard's wife and daughter." Mrs. Mary's face changed. She approached with reverence and a bit of nervousness. "You are Mr. Richard's wife?" she asked Rebecca. "I am." "Oh, my goodness." Mrs. Mary wiped her hands on her apron before greeting her. "It's an honor to meet you. Your husband was an angel in our lives. Grace told me about the snack shop. May I see it?" "Of course, with great pleasure." Mrs. Mary made a point of showing every detail of the snack shop, the refrigerated counter, the grill for sandwiches, the espresso machine, the simple but well-kept tables. "All of this was possible thanks to your husband," she said proudly. "Before, I had been unemployed for 2 years, living on odd jobs." "And how did you meet my husband?" "Through Grace. She mentioned to him that I made some tasty snacks and that I wanted to have my own business." "And he offered help?" "Not immediately," Mrs. Mary smiled. "First he came here, tried my snacks, talked with me about the business plan." "Business plan?" "Mr. Richard didn't just give money away. He made me sit down and plan everything. How much I needed, how I'd use it, how long it would take to see a return, how I'd pay it back." Emily became interested in the conversation. "Was it hard to do that planning?" "It was, but it was good. Your father taught me things I'd never thought about, like how to calculate product prices, how to manage inventory, how to deal with suppliers." "Daddy knew about snack bars?" "He knew about business," Mrs. Mary corrected. "And he taught me that a snack bar is a business like any other. It needs organization, planning, dedication." A man around 50 years old came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of snacks. "Hi, Grace," he greeted cheerfully. "Are these the special visitors you mentioned?" "Yes, they are, John. This is Mrs. Rebecca, Mr. Richard's wife." Mr. John almost dropped the tray in shock. "You're the wife of the man who saved our family?" "John," Mrs. Mary scolded her husband. "Stop with that saved talk. We saved ourselves. Mr. Richard just gave us a hand." "An important hand," Mr. John insisted. "Without him, we'd still be out of work today." "Mr. John," Rebecca said, "how did you feel being helped by someone?" The man thought before answering. "At first it was hard, ma'am. A man has his pride, right? Doesn't like depending on anyone. But Mr. Richard talked with me, said accepting help wasn't shameful when we used that help to improve." "And did you manage to improve?" "We did, Mrs. Mary answered. "The snack bar is doing well. We've already paid back more than half the loan and our children are studying." "Speaking of children, where are they?" "At school. Patricia is in her 2nd year of high school and wants to study education. Robert is in his 3rd year and wants to study business administration." "Both thinking about college?" "Not just thinking, they're going," Mr. John said with determination. "Mr. Richard always talked with them about the importance of studying, said education was the only thing nobody could take away from us." "And can you afford college?" "We're saving up," Mrs. Mary explained. "Part of the snack bar's profits goes into a college fund for the children. It was your husband's idea," Mr. John added. "He said money loaned for business had to generate money for the children's education." Rebecca was impressed with Richard's wisdom. He didn't just lend money, but also educated families about financial management and future planning. "Can I try a sandwich?" Emily asked. "Of course." Mrs. Mary became excited. "What would you like? What do you recommend?" The Sugarloaf is our specialty, French bread with hamburger, cheese, salad, and special sauce. While Mrs. Mary prepared the sandwich, Mr. John sat with the visitors to talk. Mrs. Rebecca, did you know about the work your husband was doing here in the neighborhood? I found out yesterday, Rebecca admitted. And I'm still trying to understand the scale of it all. It's really a lot. Mr. Richard helped many people, but always in a smart way, you know? Never gave money without explaining why, never did charity without teaching something. How so? Like this. When he loaned me money for the snack bar, he also taught me how to track expenses. When he helped with the boys' education, he also talked with them about responsibility. Did he come here regularly? Yes, he did. At least once a month. Always asked how the business was going, if we needed anything, how the boys were doing in school. And you didn't find it intrusive? Intrusive? Mr. John laughed. Ma'am, whoever lends money has the right to know how that money is being used. And besides, Mr. Richard didn't come as an inspector. He came as a friend. Mrs. Mary brought the snacks for Emily, who tried and approved them. It's delicious. I understand why my father invested here. He always said we made the best pastries in the area. Mrs. Mary smiled proudly. Mrs. Mary, Rebecca asked, do you know of other families my husband helped? We know of a few. There's Anthony's family, who opened an auto repair shop. Mrs. Helen, who set up a beauty salon. The folks from the bakery on the corner. All businesses. Most of them. Mr. Richard used to say it was better to teach how to fish than to give the fish. He preferred helping people have their own work. But he also helped with other things, Mr. John added. Medicine, school supplies, sometimes some urgent home repairs. Always depending on the need, Mrs. Mary explained, and always with the condition that the person would strive to improve their situation. A teenager of about 16 years old entered the snack bar carrying school books. Hi, Mom, hi, Dad, she greeted, but stopped when she saw the visitors. Patricia, come here, Mrs. Mary called. These are Mrs. Rebecca and Emily, wife and daughter of Mr. Richard. The girl approached timidly. Nice to meet you. Mr. Richard always asked about my studies when he came here. And how are your studies? Emily asked. Good. I'm in my second year of high school, and I want to study education to become a teacher for children. That's great. Was it Mr. Richard who encouraged that choice? Yes. He said I had a knack for explaining things and that America needed good teachers. And do you believe that? I do, Patricia smiled. I already give tutoring to some children here in the neighborhood. Their grades have improved a lot. Do you charge for those lessons? No, I do it for free. Mr. Richard always said that those who receive help should help others too. Rebecca was moved to see how Richard had managed to plant values of solidarity in the people he helped. Patricia, what else did my husband talk to you about? He always told me not to be ashamed of where I come from, but proud of where I want to go. And that being poor isn't a flaw, the flaw is not trying to improve. Your father really was a philosopher, Emily commented again. Yes, he was, Patricia confirmed, and a very caring person. He always remembered my birthday, important tests, the things I told him about. Another young person entered the snack bar, appearing to be about 17 years old. Hi, family, he said, but also stopped when he saw the visitors. Robert, come here, Mr. John called. These are Mrs. Rebecca and Emily, wife and daughter of Mr. Richard. The young man approached respectfully. Wow, nice to meet you. Mr. Richard was a very important person for our family. Robert is in his senior year and is going to take the college entrance exam for business administration, Mrs. Mary said proudly. Why business administration? Rebecca asked. Because I want to learn to manage businesses like Mr. Richard did. He explained to me that a good manager can help many small businesses grow. Do you want to work for a big company? I do, but I also want to have my own office to help small business owners like my parents. Mr. Richard said that those who learn should teach others. Again, Rebecca was impressed by Richard's ability to positively influence the young people he met. Robert, do you remember specific conversations with my husband? I remember many. One that stood out was when he explained to me the difference between being an employee and being an entrepreneur. What difference? He said an employee works to earn money, but an entrepreneur works to solve problems. and that solving problems always makes more money than just working. And did you understand? I understood when I saw my parents setting up this snack bar. They're not just selling snacks, they're solving the problem for people who want to eat well and cheaply. That's a very smart observation. It was Mr. Richard who taught me to think like that. After an hour talking with the Thompson family, Rebecca, Emily and Grace said their goodbyes and walked through the streets of the Brookside district. Grace, are all the families Richard helped like this? Organized, hard-working, with studious children? Most of them, yes. Your husband had a gift for identifying people who would truly make the most of the help. How did he make that identification? By talking, observing, visiting. He didn't help just anyone, only those who showed a desire to improve. And those who didn't show it? He gave advice, guidance, but not money. He said money without purpose was money thrown away. They passed by a small but busy auto repair shop. A sign out front said, Anthony's Auto Shop, Automotive Services. This is one of the businesses your husband helped start, Grace pointed out. Can we go in? Of course. They entered the shop and found a man about 40 years old working on a car. When he saw Grace, he wiped his hands and approached. Grace, what a wonderful surprise. Hi, Anthony. This is Mrs. Rebecca and Emily, Mr. Richard's wife and daughter. The man became visibly emotional. You are Mr. Richard's wife? He asked Rebecca, his voice choked up. I am. Ma'am, your husband completely changed my life. If it weren't for him, I'd still be unemployed today. Grace told me he helped you open the shop. He helped with much more than money, Anthony said. He taught me how to put together a business plan, recommended suppliers, even helped me choose the business location. Did he know about auto repair shops? He knew about business, and he had contacts in various areas. He's the one who introduced me to my main parts supplier. And how is the shop doing? Very well, Anthony smiled proudly. I've already managed to hire 2 employees, and I'm thinking about expanding. 2 employees? Yes, Mr. Richard always said the goal of a prosperous business was to generate jobs for other people too. And are the employees from here in the neighborhood? They are. One is Mrs. Helen's son, who was also helped by your husband. The other is a young man who was unemployed for a long time. What else did my husband teach you about business? Many things. That a satisfied customer is the best advertisement. That a fair price is better than a low price. That quality of service is more important than speed. And have you followed all these teachings? I follow them religiously. That's why the shop is doing well. A young man about 20 years old approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Anthony, I finished the job on the Corsa. Great, Raphael, come here. I want to introduce you to some very special people. The young man approached politely. Raphael, this is Mrs. Rebecca and Emily, Mr. Richard's wife and daughter. Mr. Richard? The young man was surprised. The man who helped you open the shop? Exactly. Wow, it's a pleasure to meet you, Raphael greeted respectfully. Mr. Richard indirectly gave me a job. If it weren't for him, Mr. Anthony wouldn't have been able to open the shop. Raphael is one of the best mechanics I know, Anthony praised, and he learns fast. Do you plan to open your own shop in the future? Emily asked. I do. Mr. Anthony is teaching me not just the technical part, but also the administrative part. He says Mr. Richard taught that a good employee should prepare to become a business owner. And do you believe that? I do. My dream is to have my own shop specialized in motorcycles. Anthony, Rebecca asked, do you encourage your employees to become competitors? I do, he answered without hesitation. Mr. Richard taught me that a good business owner creates other business owners, that the goal is to improve the whole neighborhood, not just your own situation. Aren't you afraid of losing employees? I take pride in shaping entrepreneurs, and besides, when they open their businesses, we'll be able to form partnerships. What kind of partnerships? Raphael wants to work with motorcycles. I work with cars. We can refer customers to each other, share suppliers, even share some expensive equipment. Rebecca was impressed with the business vision Richard had instilled in those people. It wasn't just charity, it was complete business education. Anthony, how long did Richard spend teaching you these things? About 6 months before lending the money. He came here every week to talk, ask me questions, give me tips. What kind of questions? About my plans, my fears, my experience with cars. He wanted to make sure I was prepared to run a business. And were you? Not completely, Anthony laughed. But he taught me what I didn't know. Your husband was very patient, Raphael added. Even after the shop opened, he kept coming to give advice. Did he come here regularly? Yes, he did. He always asked how things were going, if we needed anything, if there were any problems to solve. And you didn't think he was controlling too much? Controlling? Anthony seemed surprised. Ma'am, someone who lends money and teaches how to use it has the right to follow up. And besides, he always came as a friend, not as an inspector. After visiting 2 more families, one that had opened a bakery and another that had set up a beauty salon, Rebecca returned home with a completely new understanding of Richard's work. He wasn't just a generous donor, he was a social educator, a business mentor, a man who had created a network of social entrepreneurship in the Brookside district. Mom, Emily said in the car. Now I understand why Dad worked so much. He wasn't just supporting our family, he was building an entire community. And why he felt overwhelmed, Rebecca added. Imagine the responsibility of knowing that dozens of families depend on your decisions. Mrs. Mitchell, Grace said, now that you've met some families, what do you think of your husband's work? I think he was a visionary, Rebecca answered, and that we have a great responsibility to continue this. They arrived home at lunchtime. Rebecca prepared a quick snack for the 3 of them, and they began organizing the documents for the afternoon meeting with Grace's children. Grace, do you think Jessica, Amanda, and Brian would be interested in helping run Richard's projects? I'm sure. They always said they wanted to give back in some way. And do they have the necessary qualifications? Jessica is a doctor and understands the healthcare field. Amanda is finishing nursing school and can help with clinic planning. Brian is going to be an engineer and can handle the construction and renovation part. It would be like a family consultancy, Emily observed. Exactly. And they know the reality of the community better than any external consultant we could hire. At 3 in the afternoon, Jessica, Amanda, and Brian arrived together. They all came directly from their respective studies done work, but were visibly excited for the meeting. Good afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell, Jessica greeted. I brought some materials that might be useful for our projects. What kind of materials? Studies on deficiencies in the region's public health, data on the most common diseases in underprivileged communities, information on equipment needed for a basic clinic. Jessica, Rebecca said, impressed. You did all this since yesterday? I did. After our conversation, I spent the whole night thinking about the projects your husband planned. I wanted to come prepared to really help. Amanda also brought documents. I researched preventive nursing programs and health education, and Brian prepared some cost estimates for construction. Did you 3 work together on this? We did, Brian confirmed. We stayed up late talking about how we can honor your Richard's memory. They all sat in the living room, and Rebecca presented the documents she had found about the Richard Wilson Foundation. This was my husband's final project, she explained. An official organization to continue the work he did informally. Jessica examined the documents with growing attention. Mrs. Mitchell, this is very well structured. Your husband had researched all the legislation about non-profit organizations. Did he manage to register anything? From what I see here, he prepared all the documentation, but didn't get to file it. Does that mean we can continue? Yes, we can. In fact, it would be much easier now, because we have all the research ready. Brian flipped through the section about construction and renovations. The architectural plans are very detailed. He even calculated materials and labor. Do you think it's feasible to handle all this? With organization and planning, yes, Amanda answered. But it would be good to start with smaller projects and gradually expand. Where would you start? With the medical clinic, Jessica suggested. It's the area where I can contribute most directly, and there's an urgent need in the community. What kind of need? Basic care, mainly for children and the elderly. Many people still rely only on the health clinic, which is always overcrowded. And would you have time to dedicate to this? I can dedicate a few hours a week, Jessica said. And when I finish my residency, I could dedicate more. Me too, Amanda added. And I know other nursing students who would be interested in participating. Brian, what about you? I can help with planning the physical part, renovations, adjustments, equipment purchases. And when I graduate, I could run the housing improvement program. Emily, who had remained quiet listening, finally spoke. Can I participate too? I know I'm still young, but I'd like to help in some way. Of course, Jessica smiled. You could help with the administrative part, or with educational programs for teenagers. What kind of educational programs? Guidance about health, family planning, sex education, disease prevention. Teenagers trust other teenagers more. That's true, Amanda agreed. And you could organize study groups, tutoring classes, things like that. Rebecca looked around the room and saw 5 excited young people discussing ways to continue Richard's work. It was exactly what he would have wanted to see. Let's do this, she finally said. How about we start with a pilot clinic project, something small to test our organizational capacity? Good idea, Grace approved. There's an empty house nearby that the owner might rent for a low price for social purposes. Do you know the owner? I do. It's Mr. Emmanuel, an older gentleman who was helped by your Richard a few years ago. I'm sure he would give a special price. And how much would be needed to set up a basic clinic? Rebecca asked Jessica. The young doctor took a paper and started making calculations. For basic care, about 50,000 Rs initially. That would include rent, basic equipment, essential medications and office supplies. And to run it monthly? About 10,000 Riais per month, including rent, electricity bill, medication restocking, and minimum wage for a receptionist. And would you work voluntarily? Initially, yes, Jessica confirmed, until the project stabilizes. It's decided then, Rebecca said. We'll start with the pilot clinic. Really? Amanda got excited. Are we really going to do this? We are. That's what Richard would have wanted. Mum, Emily said, can I tell my friends at school? Maybe some would like to volunteer. Of course, the more people involved, the better. Brian raised his hand. Mrs. Rebecca, may I make a suggestion about funding? Of course. How about creating an online fundraising campaign? We can tell your husband's story and ask for donations to continue his work. Good idea, Jessica agreed. Real stories always move people. And we can organize charity events, Amanda added. Bazaars, raffles, cultural performances. Grace, Rebecca asked, do you think the families Richard helped would be interested in participating? I'm sure. Many people always wanted to give back in some way. Then it's decided. Rebecca stood up. Officially, we are creating the Richard Wilson Foundation. Everyone applauded, and Rebecca felt a deep emotion. She was finally honoring her husband's memory the way he would have wanted, as a family, transparently, with love and purpose. When do we start? Emily asked. Tomorrow, Rebecca answered without hesitation. Grace, can you schedule a meeting with the homeowner you mentioned? Yes, I can. Jessica, can you research the necessary documentation to register the foundation? I can. Brian, can you make a detailed budget for the house renovation? I can. Amanda, can you talk to your nursing colleagues about volunteering? I can. And I will find a lawyer specialized in the non-profit sector, Rebecca concluded. Mrs. Rebecca, Grace said emotionally, I'm sure your Richard would be very proud. I'm sure of that too, Rebecca smiled. And for the first time since he passed, I feel at peace. The meeting ended with everyone excited and with clear tasks. When Grace's children left, Rebecca was alone with Emily and the cleaning lady in the living room. Mom, Emily said, thank you for discovering this part of Dad. Thank you for supporting me in this. Grace, Emily turned to the cleaning lady. Thank you for keeping Dad's secrets for so long. It must have been hard. It was hard indeed, Grace admitted. But now that you all know everything, I feel relieved. From now on, there are no more secrets, Rebecca said. We will work together as a family. As a family, Grace repeated emotionally. And Grace, Rebecca continued, besides returning to work here as a cleaning lady, I would like you to also be the community coordinator for the foundation. What would that be? You would be the link between the foundation and the families in the community. You know everyone, you know who needs help, you understand the neighborhood dynamics. Would it be a paid position? It would. You deserve to be valued for the knowledge and experience you have. Grace began to cry. Mrs. Rebecca, I never imagined that one day I would be considered so important. You were always important, Grace. You just needed someone to recognize that. That night, Rebecca slept better than she had in months. For the first time since Richard's passing, she felt she had a clear purpose and an extended family to share that purpose with. The next morning, she woke up early and went to Richard's office. She sat in his armchair and opened the notebook, where he wrote down his thoughts about his social work. On the last page, she wrote, "Richard, I discovered your secret, and I discovered you were wrong about one thing. Our family wouldn't just understand your work, but would be proud of it. We are continuing your projects, but now out in the open, without fear or shame. Emily is excited to participate. Grace is happy she no longer has to keep secrets, and I am at peace for finally knowing the man of integrity I was married to. Thank you for planting seeds of love and solidarity that will continue to grow through our extended family. With all my love and admiration, Rebecca." She closed the notebook and put it away in the drawer. Not as a secret, but as a precious memory of a man who had dedicated his life to making the world a better place. The phone rang. It was Grace, excited. "Mrs. Mitchell, I spoke with Mr. Emmanuel. He was moved when he heard about our plans and said he would rent the house for 1,000 rials per month to the foundation. The normal rate would be 3,000. Perfect. And is the house in good condition? It needs some basic repairs, but nothing too complicated. Brian can take a look this afternoon." "Great. And did Jessica get the information about registering the foundation?" "She did. She said it could be ready in 15 days if the documentation is correct." "Grace, it seems like everything is falling into place." "It really is. It's as if your Richard is helping organize everything from above." "Perhaps he is," Rebecca smiled. During the following week, things happened with surprising speed. Brian assessed the house and presented a repair estimate well within expectations. Jessica filed all the foundation documentation. Amanda secured volunteers among her nursing colleagues. Emily organized a group of high school students interested in participating. Rebecca hired a specialized lawyer, and within 10 days everything was officially underway. The first activity of the Richard Wilson Foundation would be a launch event right in the Brookside district, with the participation of all the families Richard had helped over the years. "Grace," Rebecca said on the eve of the event, "do you think we did the right thing organizing this so quickly? I think we did exactly what your Richard would do. He wasn't one to drag his feet when he had a good idea. And do you think people will understand our proposal?" "They'll understand because the proposal came from the heart, and because you're doing this out of love, not obligation." On the day of the event, Rebecca, Emily, and Grace arrived early at the public school that had provided the space. Gradually, the families arrived. The Thompsons from the snack bar, Anthony from the auto shop, Mrs. Helen from the salon, the family from the bakery, and many others that Rebecca was meeting for the first time. Each family brought something: homemade treats, soft drinks, decorations, borrowed chairs. Within a few hours, the schoolyard was transformed into a large community gathering. "Mrs. Mitchell," Anthony approached, "I want you to meet my wife and children. They always wanted to meet the family of the man who changed our lives." "Mrs. Mitchell," Mrs. Mary from the snack bar said, "I brought some savory snacks for everyone. It's our way of contributing to the event." "Mrs. Mitchell," a gentleman she didn't know introduced himself, "I'm Emmanuel, the owner of the house you're going to rent. I want to say it's an honor to be part of this project." Rebecca circulated among the families and learned each of their stories. The carpenter Richard helped buy professional tools, the seamstress who got industrial sewing machines, the young man who graduated in accounting and now provided free services to other small business owners in the neighborhood. Each story was an example of how investment in education and entrepreneurship multiplied, creating a network of community prosperity. When it was time for speeches, Rebecca stepped onto the small makeshift platform. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and I'm the widow of Richard Wilson. The crowd applauded respectfully. Until a week ago, I didn't know you existed. I didn't know about the work my husband did here, the lives he had touched, the dreams he had helped realize. I discovered everything by chance, and I confess that at first I was shocked, not because of his generosity, but because of the discovery that during 20 years of marriage, he alone carried the responsibility of caring for dozens of families. Today, getting to know all of you, I understand why Richard insisted on coming here regularly. You weren't just beneficiaries of his charity. You were his extended family, the living proof that love and solidarity can transform realities. The audience listened in respectful silence. That's why we're here today to announce that Richard's work didn't die with him. We're officially creating the Richard Wilson Foundation to continue the projects he had planned. Enthusiastic applause echoed through the courtyard. But this time, it won't be a solitary effort. It will be a family effort, with transparency, with the participation of all of you who know the real needs of the community. Our first initiative will be a free medical clinic, coordinated by Jessica, Grace's daughter, who became a doctor thanks to Richard's support. Jessica stepped onto the platform and waved to the crowd, who greeted her warmly. The clinic will be followed by housing improvement projects, coordinated by Brian, who's finishing his engineering degree, also thanks to Richard's support. Brian waved timidly but with evident pride. And we'll have preventive health programs, coordinated by Amanda, who's finishing nursing school. Amanda stepped onto the platform, smiling. These three young people are living examples of what Richard believed. That investment in education becomes multiplied opportunities for the entire community. The audience applauded the three siblings enthusiastically. But none of this would be possible without Grace. Rebecca called the cleaning lady to the stage. She was the guardian of Richard's secrets for years, and now she'll be the community coordinator of our foundation. Grace stepped onto the platform emotional and waved to everyone. And finally, Rebecca pulled Emily onto the stage. My daughter Emily, who at 17 already understands that youth with purpose can change the world. The applause was warm and lasting. I want to finish by saying Richard would be very proud to see all of you here today. Proud not just of the successes you've achieved, but of your willingness to keep helping one another. Because that was his dream, to create a network of solidarity that didn't depend on just one person, but that sustained itself through each person's love and responsibility. Today that dream becomes reality. The Richard Wilson Foundation isn't mine, it isn't my family's, it's ours, belonging to all of us who believe that together we can do much more than alone. The crowd stood and applauded for several minutes. Many people were crying with emotion. After the speeches, the families gathered in small groups, sharing stories about Richard and discussing ideas for future projects. Rebecca circulated among everyone, listening to suggestions and learning even more about the impact her husband had caused in the community. Mrs. Helen from the beauty salon approached with a proposal. Mrs. Rebecca, I'd like to offer free haircuts once a month for the neediest families. It's my way of giving back. What a beautiful idea, Helen. We can organize this along with the clinic services. A young man Rebecca didn't know introduced himself. Mrs. Rebecca, I'm Peter. I graduated in accounting thanks to your Richard. I'd like to offer free accounting services for the foundation and for small businesses in the community. Peter, that would be essential. I accept with great pleasure. As she talked with more people, Rebecca realized Richard had created much more than a charity network. He had planted a culture of solidarity that was now blooming naturally. Mom, Emily approached. The people from my school who came today are super excited. They want to organize fundraising campaigns and charity events. What kind of campaigns? Raffles, bazaars, theater performances, and the school principal said we can use the space whenever we need it. Grace appeared beside them with a list in her hand. Mrs. Rebecca, we already have 15 confirmed volunteers for the clinic. Doctors, nurses, receptionists, cleaning staff. All from the community. Most of them. Some people were helped by your Richard and want to give back, and some just want to be part of something good. Brian joined the group carrying a tablet. Mrs. Rebecca, I did a quick estimate of the costs for all the projects suggested today. If we get the partnerships people offered, we can save almost 60% of the initial budget. How so? Discounted construction materials, volunteer labor, donated equipment, free professional services. The community is organizing itself to cover a good part of the costs. Jessica approached excitedly. Mrs. Rebecca, I spoke with some doctor colleagues. I got 3 more doctors willing to donate a few hours per week to the clinic, and a private lab that will do basic tests at 50% off. Amanda also brought good news. I secured a partnership with the nursing college. Final year students can intern at our clinic, which means qualified labor and academic supervision. Rebecca looked around and saw dozens of people working together, planning, offering help, taking on responsibilities. It was exactly the vision Richard had for the future. Everyone, she got everyone's attention. I want to propose something. How about we schedule our first official foundation meeting for next week? Good idea, several people said at the same time. Let's meet right here at the school. Everyone brings their proposals in writing and we start organizing everything officially. And the clinic? Asked Jessica. When can we start the renovation? Next Monday, Rebecca answered without hesitation. I already have Brian's budget. I already know I'm going to rent Mr. Emmanuel's house. I just need to transfer the money. Really? Brian was surprised. We're really starting on Monday. We are. There's no time to waste. The community needs the clinic, and we have the means to provide it. Spontaneous applause echoed through the courtyard. The enthusiasm was contagious. When the event ended, late in the afternoon, Rebecca, Emily, and Grace stayed to help clean up. They worked in silence for a few minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. Grace, Rebecca finally said, how do you think Richard would react if he saw all this today? I think he would be moved, Grace smiled, but not surprised. He always knew these people had the potential for great things. And you, Emily? How do you feel being part of this? I feel proud, Mom. Proud of Dad, proud of our family, proud to be able to make a difference. You know what moves me the most? Rebecca stopped sweeping for a moment. It's realizing that Richard wasn't just helping people. He was building a family. A very big family, Grace agreed. And now this family will keep growing. 3 months later, the Richard Wilson Medical Clinic was officially inaugurated. The space was completely renovated, with doctors' offices, a nursing room, a basic pharmacy, and a cozy reception area. Jessica was seeing her 10th patient of the day when Rebecca arrived for a supervision visit. How's it going, Jessica? Amazing, Mrs. Rebecca. We've already seen over 200 people in 2 months, and the best part, 0 emergency cases that could have been prevented with early care. Does that mean the preventive work is paying off? It's working perfectly. Amanda organized health education groups that are making a real difference in people's lives. Amanda appeared at the office door. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so glad you came today. I want to show you the results of the vaccination campaign we did last month. What were the results? We managed to vaccinate 120 children who had fallen behind on their immunization records, and we identified 15 cases of health issues that needed follow-up care. And are these cases being followed? All of them. Some right here at the clinic, others we referred to specialists, but none were left behind. Rebecca walked through the clinic's hallways and saw the walls decorated with drawings made by children from the community. Thank you notes, photos of the families served, colorful educational posters. At the reception, she found an elderly lady waiting for care. Good morning, she greeted politely. Good morning, dear. Who might you be? I'm Rebecca, Richard's widow. The lady's face lit up. Oh, you're the wife of the angel Richard. What an honor to meet you. Did you know my husband? Yes, I did. He helped my granddaughter get into a vocational training course. Now she works as a nursing technician. That's wonderful to hear. And now Dr. Jessica is taking care of my high blood pressure. I haven't had a single episode in 3 months. Are you happy with the care here? I love it. The girls are so kind, they explain everything clearly, and best of all, we don't pay a thing. That's what the clinic is here for. May God bless you and your family. You're doing such beautiful work. Rebecca was moved by the lady's heartfelt words. It was confirmation they were on the right path. As she left the clinic, she found Brian supervising construction on a small building next door. What's happening here, Brian? We're building an annex for dental care. We found a volunteer dentist and got equipment donated from a private practice. We already have a dentist. Yes, we do. It's Dr. Mark, the son of one of the families Mr. Richard helped. He graduated 2 years ago and wants to give back. That's wonderful. When will it be ready? In 3 weeks, and I already have a list of 60 people waiting for appointments. Brian, are you happy with your engineering studies? Very happy and motivated. I know everything I'm learning will be used to improve people's lives. Your father would be proud of you. I know, and I hope to be as upstanding a professional as he was. Rebecca returned home with a warmed heart. In just a few months, they had not only continued Richard's work, but expanded it beyond their initial expectations. That evening, Emily came home from school excited. "Mom, I have amazing news to share." "What news?" "The Student Council approved our proposal for a social project. We're creating a free college prep course for underprivileged youth." "How so?" "Seniors will volunteer to teach classes for community youth who want to take college entrance exams but can't afford prep courses." "And do you have enough teachers?" "Yes, we do, and the principal approved using school classrooms on Saturdays." "Emily, that's fantastic. How many students do you expect to serve?" "About 40 in the first class, but if it works, we can expand." "And who will coordinate?" "Me and 3 other classmates. And guess who's going to be our educational consultant?" "Who?" "Patricia, the daughter of Mrs. Mary from the diner. She's starting pedagogy next year and wants to gain experience." Rebecca hugged her daughter with pride. In less than a year, Emily had transformed from a teenager focused only on her own problems into a young social leader. "Mom," Emily continued, "do you know what makes me happiest in all of this?" "What?" "Realizing that Daddy planted a seed that's bearing fruit far beyond what he imagined. Every person he helped is now helping others." "That's exactly it, my dear. It's the multiplier effect of love." Grace entered the room carrying a tray with coffee and cookies. "Mrs. Mitchell, may I interrupt? I have some news about the foundation." "Of course. Sit here with us." "I received 3 partnership proposals today. A supermarket chain wants to donate monthly food baskets. A pharmacy wants to provide discounted medication. And a transportation company wants to make a minibus available to take clinic patients to specialized appointments. All of this spontaneously? All of it. The foundation's story is spreading, and local business owners want to participate. What do you think of these proposals?" "I think they're great, but we need to be careful not to lose focus on the local community." "How so?" "Mr. Richard always insisted that solutions should come from the community itself. If we start relying too much on big companies, we might lose that characteristic." Rebecca admired Grace's wisdom. Even with growing success, it was important to maintain the principles Richard had established. "You're right, Grace. We'll accept the partnerships, but always prioritizing the community's leading role." "Exactly. Companies can help, but we decide the priorities." By the end of that year, the Richard Wilson Foundation had become a reference in community development. The clinic served 300 people per month. The housing program had renovated 15 homes. The college prep course had helped 20 young people get into public universities. But for Rebecca, the most important indicator of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in people's transformation. Jessica had become one of the most respected doctors in the region, known for the care with which she treated underprivileged patients. Amanda coordinated preventive health programs that were being studied by other organizations. Brian led a group of young volunteer engineers who provided free consulting for housing improvements. Grace had discovered a natural talent for social management and was studying public administration at a university that offered full scholarships to professionals from the third sector. Emily had become one of the main student leaders in the region, coordinating social projects between various private and public schools. And Rebecca had found a life purpose that filled the void left by Richard's departure. In December, on the first anniversary of discovering Richard's social work, Rebecca organized a special celebration at the cemetery where it had all begun. Over 100 people gathered at Richard's grave for a gratitude ceremony. Every family he had helped brought a flower and a thank you letter. "Richard, Rebecca spoke before the grave, surrounded by all those people. "1 year ago, I came here crying, not understanding why you had left so soon. Today I return smiling, understanding that you didn't leave. You multiplied. Every life you touched became a source of love for other lives. Every dream you helped realize generated new dreams. Every seed you planted is bearing fruit that feeds an entire community. Thank you for trusting us to continue your work. Thank you for teaching us that true love doesn't keep secrets, but builds bridges. Thank you for showing us that family isn't just those who carry our surname, but those who carry our values. Rest in peace knowing your legacy is in good hands, and that these hands will pass it forward to future generations forever." People placed their flowers and letters on the grave, and many wept with emotion, but they were tears of gratitude, not sadness. When everyone had left, Rebecca stayed alone with Emily and Grace before Richard's headstone. "Grace," she finally said, "thank you for forcing me to discover who my husband really was." "I didn't force anything, Mrs. Mitchell. The truth always finds a way to come out." "Mom," Emily said, "do you think Dad knew things would turn out this way?" "I think he had hope," Rebecca answered, "and I think he trusted in the transformative power of love." "And he was right," Grace added. "Love always multiplies." The three women walked together to the exit of the memorial park. Rebecca looked back one last time and saw Richard's headstone covered with colorful flowers. There was no more sadness in that place, only gratitude and hope. 1 year earlier, she had arrived there as a lost widow and discovered she had been married to a stranger. Now she left as a fulfilled woman who had found her true family and her true purpose. Richard hadn't taken his secrets to the grave. He had left a treasure map that would lead his family to discover what truly matters in life, the transformative power of shared love. End of story. And now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. Do you believe Rebecca made the right choice by continuing Richard's work? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. We look forward to reading your thoughts. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.